Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fancy Hat Day. It's Culture Club half hour.
So for those who are not watching this and are just listening, Jeff is wearing a hat from the High Art Initiative that High Snobiety did with Christie's. Is that right?
No, I think it was a standalone, if I'm not mistaken. I think they did it for
Okay.
Basel. Yeah.
Okay, got it. But and I am wearing the Gontourage hat from the podcast How Long Gone, friends of the show.
I love a good podcast hat. We should make podcast hats. Like podcast dad caps. It's a thing.
I mean, we couldn't be more podcast dads if you asked us to be.
Right. Anyway, welcome again to another half-hour edition. Ben and I return, bringing you conversation around what's been happening in the world. Ben, I want to start with something interesting, and I don't know how many.
Thank Christ for that. Can you imagine starting with something that wasn't interesting, like dad hats?
Suck. Dad hats couldn't be worse. So I don't know about you, but I follow a lot of former punk rockers or guys that were in, hardcore bands in the '80s on Instagram, and occasionally and of course we all grow up, we have children, and it's really fun to watch these old punk rockers go to like their kids' favorite shows. Most of the time it's like a Taylor Swift show, and it's
okay.
And there's this respect for the performance or showmanship that she puts on, right? Like
Sure.
she's a true talent. So I kind of had that experience myself last night as a fan of a lot of different music. My son is a huge fan of a New York-based trio called AJR. It's a band of three brothers that play very pop melodic music. They came up in New York, busking like everyone else, and they're on their first headlining arena tours. They've been around for, better part of probably 7 years.
Okay.
So I went to this down at the Hard Rock Live here in Miami, and I got to tell you, I was blown away by these guys.
Okay.
The music is super poppy, but what I realized is that the stage performance that needs to be put on by talent today is way larger. It's way next level compared to what we grew up on, right?
Yeah.
And just as an example, if you go to, I don't want to use the word Gen Z, but if you go to a younger show by younger artists in the 20s, the stage is next level.
Oh yeah.
But yet, if you go and see, so maybe somebody from our generation that's touring, quite frankly, it's just a show because I love the music. But today's performances are something else. So while not every AJR song is up my alley, it was incredible to see where you have to be in the world in order to be seen.
What the table stakes are. Yeah. Well, look, combination of a few different factors, right? One is this is, generation that grows up on digital moving media and the expectation of screens at every moment of their cultural lives. The second thing is ticket prices, right?
Sure.
Like to justify ticket prices, you have to have a marginal gain in production value.
That's right. That's why Fugazi was always $5, right? Because they just came with a couple instruments and speakers.
Yeah, well, or seen a different way, it's why Fugazi didn't have LED screens, right? Because you don't need them.
Imagine if Fugazi showed up with a stage show.
We've talked about this, I think, a little bit, but there was an imagined. Speaking of How Long Gone, there was an imagined scenario on that, 6 months or so ago, where they were talking about how, to your point about old hardcore dudes, Fugazi could sell out SoFi.
Oh my God.
But would insist, like, let's say that they were going to do that, they would insist on a super, super accessible ticket price. So it's just the cognitive dissonance of playing in a football stadium to 50, 70, 100,000 people for $5.
Right.
It's it would be kind of amazing. But also it would behoove Fugazi in that case to get into the LED bag. And then it's like, okay, so what does that stage show look like? Do they hire S. Devlin like everybody else does, or Willow Perone? So it's sort of like it's fascinating in that regard. And then the last thing is, it's just like, if you think about your stage show as a super format that can be transposed or translated into other mediums,
right,
you start to think about like, okay, how do I create a single piece of content that lives on stage behind me on the LEDs, but also lives on YouTube as my music video, but also comes to life captured in part as a t-shirt or a piece of merch or whatever it is. I think that's what's going on. But I'm more interested in this thing about, you know, hardcore dads taking their kids to shows. Was there somebody else you were thinking of?
Yeah, I think the account that I'm talking about, I think it's called Results of Chaos, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I don't know.
And I apologize. I believe he was definitely in the scene back in the day, and I was just taken by this post he made with Taylor Swift. And by the way, this happened in the summer during Taylor's tour.
Okay, got it. Okay.
But I kind of thought about that post in the middle of this show that I was at myself.
Right, discovering. Know? So and so what did Adi think of the
live show?
Was this his first concert?
No, this is actually his third concert. So he went with his mother to see another like YouTube tween-centric artist named Boy with Uke. This guy has a ukulele.
Boy with Uke, really?
Yeah, and he doesn't play that many shows, and he plays mostly small theater. So he went with his mom
he
up to
play that many shows.
He doesn't. So he went up to his mom to Chicago. But and then and then I think his second show, which was my daughter's first show, was Bastille. My dear friend Bo Colburn is there, works on that team for many years, and it's great. But he loved the show. AJR to him was like it was his show, right?
Got it. That's cool.
And it was his show, and I was there with him, and I think he really got kind of excited. Here's the thing: for those that have kids, and there's many, I'm sure many. When you're in your car or in your house, your children, at least my kids, are constantly playing music or constantly on maybe a screen that's playing music.
Yeah.
And it's funny, when I got to the AJR show, this is how subliminal music is. I knew every word. I knew every word to every song.
Wow, really?
Not every word, but like a tremendous number of choruses because of that exposure I got from my kids. So having that, go ahead.
No, it's funny. I was just going to say, Campbell is going to see City Morgue, which is, I don't know if you know City Morgue, but they're sort of, hip hop group out of New York or based out of Huntington, Long Island, basically, because that's where the show is. But
shout out.
I would describe it as kind of horrorcore, modern day horrorcore.
Fun.
One of the guys is apparently a big influence on 6ix9ine, just as a point of reference.
Crazy.
So I am interested to know, but it feels like,
is he driving there?
Campbell? No, he doesn't drive. Doesn't actually. We did some driving over the weekend, but he's going to take the train. He's taking the LARR out. But he and his buddy are going out to see City Morgue, and so he played me some City Morgue the other day, and I wouldn't say it's my cup of tea, but I understand it, and it reminded me a lot because of these kind of hardcore overtones. It reminded me of Dr. Octagon, so I made him listen to the Dr. Octagon, first Dr. Octagon record, which was pretty funny. But it ties into this interesting thing we talked about it at breakfast this morning about cultural exchange, intergenerational cultural exchange, like the point where I can say to my kids, "Hey, what do you know about Zyarica, the Flaming Lips record that was designed to be played on 4 CD players simultaneously?" And they don't know anything about that, and they think that's interesting. And then they tell me about Quandale Dingle.
Who's that? Quandale Dingle. That's amazing.
Quandale Dingle it's a meme character from the TikToks of the whole world, and he's apparently a little bit past his prime, Quandale Dingle, but he was recently resuscitated because in the infamous TikTok Riz Party video, one of the guys was nicknamed Turkish Quandale Dingle, and so I had my kids explain to me what the hell was going on there.
Youth is fun, man. It's fun, Yeah. Though it does talk about this interesting, like, and we could certainly bring on a psychologist to help us think about this, but like the fear of cultural disconnection. I think it's something really interesting, and people call it FOMO. But one of the benefits of teaching is that I can get a conversation from 2 ways. To the point you made,
sure.
Quandale Dingle. If somebody asked me Quandale, I want to learn. What I find more interesting, and I think we have talked about this a lot, is that while you and I and maybe our generation is open to hearing a lot more, maybe than our parents' generation. It's interesting how future generations, or at least, sorry, Gen Z, was a little bit more disconnected with what happened in Gen X. At least that's from an outside take.
Sure.
Where my son, who I think is a Gen Alpha now, because he's 8, this guy's in love with, he's in love with the most random 80s songs. Simple Minds, Elton John's I'm Still Standing. I'm like, where are you getting this? And then other days he'll ask me for Depeche Mode, which is, right up my alley. And every once in a while, a little Elvis Presley, Burning Love. It's crazy how if you give children information or exposure, they sponge it like crazy.
Yeah.
They sponge it like crazy. And at this age, this is where, he can hear one song he can hear a song once and essentially get the chorus dead on the next time.
Yeah. Well, look, it is interesting. I think I would make the assertion that all of these generations are sponge like. It's different. The access to the content is different. And it's funny. I thought you were going to say something a little bit different about the connection to Gen X media in particular.
Okay.
One of the things that is important to note is that a lot of the media that we grew up on, we are used to thinking of the paradigm we're in now as everything is available all the time through digital channels. But the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of stuff that isn't available. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't have a digital fingerprint right now. And so I think many of the things that we think about that are formative documents for ourselves, whether consciously or unconsciously, you can't just find them, right? You, Jeff, as a collector, or me as a collector, have held on to them, or, you've got to go on this incredible search to try to find things. Whereas the kids have been used to just pressing a button and getting everything. And so, the level and depth of curiosity or the passion for the hunt is different.
I think the thing that I sometimes get caught up with in one of the trending classes I teach is that there's so much information that a student will grab it, put it in a deck, put it in a slide, and then present it.
Yep.
And of course, the one thing I always told my students from day one is like, if you put something in a deck, make sure that you understand the context of whatever it is.
Right.
And that forces the hand. But funny enough, I actually had this conversation yesterday with an incoming class of, I think, year ones or freshmen, they would call it at the school, in trend forecasting, throwing out, spitballing cultural references and realizing just how much has to be learned, how much has to be taught. And one of the things I did yesterday was sort of make a hit list of a toolbox where I'm like, look, if you want to be successful in this class or even in the work and research, here's where you start. And I'm curious to know what you think of it. One of the first things I did was make a list of what I would call archival accounts on Instagram. These are accounts that, like 90s anxiety, that are really bringing to light a piece of the 90s constantly, day in and day out, with one post. Another one that comes to mind, which I think you're very familiar with, of course, is Hidden Research, which is a good archival documentation of things past and forward. But on the note around having not every piece of information actually be in line, look at the Face magazine. Not every copy of the Face is available as a PDF online. And the account I think it's called storage.based, just today in their stories, you see this kid opening up a box of, 15 back issues of the Face. And you're like, that's what you have to do, right?
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. And getting that deep is, quite frankly, something that you just have to keep pushing. And it sounds like it's, for you and I, it's commonplace. And I would suspect for a lot of people listening to the show as well. But how do we reinforce the importance of the cultural context? How do we reinforce that you gotta know a little bit about what you're referencing?
Yeah, I think, well, I think it's, I don't know that you necessarily have to reinforce that part of it. I think you have to reinforce the idea that there is value and unique difference in having the full context and in being aware, having a piece of knowledge that other people don't have, right? And
yes, exactly. If you have that knowledge, this is something I enforce on them as well. If you're young today and coming up, more than ever, you have the opportunity to learn, or at least be in front of professors or educators that can give you practical knowledge about what's happened over the last 20 years, say in the fashion space or in style or in media. which is not what we had when we were coming up. There certainly was no curriculum. But the thing to be reinforced is that, you know, the 20 people in this room, you guys are fighting against 20 other people in 2,000 other classrooms. You know, you need an advantage. And in my opinion, the huge advantage is that Jian DeLeon level of knowledge about what's here and what came before. Yeah. And what's coming forward.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I just had some teenagers enter the house unexpectedly.
That's all right. This is live.
You know, our guest stars in today's
podcast. Do you know that Eleanor Roosevelt, former first lady, or our president was married to the former first lady at the time. She had a radio show back in the day before TV. And one of the things
I did not know that.
She did, it was extremely famous. She spoke to, of course, Americans and really directly to women. But importantly, at times in those radio shows, she would turn around and yell at her kids in the White House.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
that's amazing.
It was live.
That's amazing.
It led to an understanding that, oh my God, you know, like they're as real as us, or
they're
on the same level. So I'm not very worried. I'm not worried about Campbell coming through the door.
No, it
makes it
less,
real.
It's less, you know, the idea of, or I think the interesting part there is less the idea of, you know, Campbell coming through the door, but more and to your point, the renormalization of that, the reality of daily life intruding into, let's call it, work environments, which I think which the pandemic obviously
huge
brought back, right? Prior to 2020, it would not have been acceptable to have your kids interrupt you in the middle of a professional conversation. It would not have been appropriate for a dog to be barking or whatever. But then when we're forced to work, when everybody gets forced to work from home, you're reconfronted with that. I think that it helps humanize us and make us relatable. Even though it's so crazy. Annoying.
You're absolutely right. The humanization is like, I kind of sometimes go, come on, guys. And I'm not even sure why I'm saying it. It's more of like, what can we do to just be better to one another in that sense? But to the point around, go ahead.
Well, but I think the corollary to that, right, is that in a universe, or not even a universe, in an immediate world where AI starts to remove a lot of the human labor from small things, the humanness of our cultural label starts to become much more important, right? It's like when a disembodied algorithm can tell me the answer to anything or can give me expert advice or whatever it is, the fact that a human touches it or shapes it is the thing that makes it actually interesting or valuable.
Right. By the way, on that note, speaking of what makes it valuable on AI, we're taping this on Wednesday, but yesterday, OpenAI announced a new version of Chat GPT.
Yeah.
GPT. That, and I think the big advancement or innovation is that it can now reason with itself. If I'm not mistaken, it now has the ability to reason between LLMs, if I'm not mistaken, which of course is
interesting.
A large language model.
Yeah. I don't know. I did not read deeply about that, just knowing that there would be so much news that I'll get to it eventually. But
sure.
What I mainly read was that it was it is more personable now. It is more, feels more human. It is more conversational than it was before, which is sort of interesting because it begs the question to my point, like, how do we assess real humanity and real human touch in these things as we go forward? And, you know, to what extent do AIs, being fundamentally not human, just act as a simulacra for actual human connection? In other words, at what point will they be able to pass a real smell test? And at what point do we just go, okay, this is sort of a funny joke?
I think we're still at a place where we can.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it doesn't. We can deduce. That's right. And it just feels to me like we're still in the sort of novelty, funny joke stage at this point.
A great episode,
even with this massive improvement. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the massive improvement alongside of this relatable or personable AI that you may or not have a conversation with. Highly recommend everyone listen to New York Times Hard Fork podcast. It's a technology podcast.
Oh yeah.
Featuring Kevin Roos and
Casey Newton and Kevin Roos.
Newton, right?
Yeah.
And this week, actually, I forgot. I don't know which one of them. I think it was Kevin. He deep dived into these personality AIs.
Yeah.
And I think he basically made 10 AI friends. And it's well worth listening to. Find that episode of Hard Fork where Kevin talks about his 7 AI friends, because they go deep into exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I was going to say, when you hear the voices, some of them you can tell it's AI, but others, I mean, holy shit, we're pretty near. I don't know what's the word. Like, we're there. We're getting close.
All right. Yeah. No, I will check it out. The other thing is something I wanted to quickly talk about.
Yes.
I went on Monday night to the release party for the new issue of Byline, the music issue of Byline.
This is issue 3?
No, this is issue 6, I think, actually. Okay. Most of them have been digital. This is the second one that has been done as a print edition. But in any case, they the party was at a spot on the Lower East Side called Casetta, which is not a big spot. It's the combination of the former Brown Cafe from years and years ago and the place next door to it, but not a big place. And so it spilled out into the street, and it was a great scene of the young media types who are setting apart, let's call it downtown media culture. It's James and Lawrence from Throwing Fits, and
which is a great conversation to have.
How Long Gone, and it's Emily Sundberg from Feed Me, and it's Sasha, who runs the social accounts for New York Mag, and it's a bunch of young publicists, and there were a bunch of most of the people who are featured in the magazine were there. So it's Jabuki, and it's Sophia, whose last name escapes me, but we'll put in the show notes. And in any case, it was really fun, but it was nice. For me, it was cool because it was like getting to see the who's who again of that. The reason I bring it up though is because the print edition is like, it's a lovely document, but it's totally driven by enthusiasm. Like there are almost no business decisions being made in the print document. And
isn't that great?
Well, on the one hand, as full disclosure, I am an advisor to Byline. And so as an advisor, I look at it and go, oh, there's all these things that we could be doing. Let's talk about them. But as a fan of them and as a fan of print culture generally, it's such a statement of enthusiasm that you kind of can't help but love it, or at least I can't. Right. So
print today, I think a lot of people forget that most print in general was meant to be read and thrown away, including comic books.
Yeah.
These are not things that were meant to be kept, right? And thank God nerds like you and I keep way too much print and paper in our houses. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's an enthusiast thing. And it's interesting because now, and this is crazy, think about, we make a connection to print in the same way we may make a connection to the fashion we wear or the art that we buy, right? And more than ever, it's becoming that conversation piece rather than, another copy of Life magazine. Another copy of Details. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're just not, and print is, I'm not saying print is thriving and there is no lack of print.
Right.
But not as many, I would certainly say that people don't necessarily turn to it the same way. What is interesting, though,
of course,
is when you follow sort of the zine model, which I think Byline touches a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
It just feels more DIY. And that's the beauty of publications like Byline.
Well, I think, that's what I mean by the enthusiasm. It's like they are in love with making a physical item that contains all of the thoughts and all of the work that they've done on it, and they don't care particularly to know what the orthodoxy is, right? Like for instance, the editor's letter is on cover 2, meaning the inside cover of the book, meaning the most valuable space for advertising in the, this is what we've all been taught. So had they asked me, I would have said, put the ads there.
Right.
But
sorry, are there ads in the mag?
There are some, yeah. Yeah, there's some ads.
Wow. Okay.
But they, and it was done in collaboration with Urban Outfitters.
Oh, cool.
Which is it's the second collaboration they've done with Urban Outfitters, which is great. And shout out to Urban Outfitters for supporting in that way, right? Knowing that despite the fact that most of the people that you're selling to through your stores are not print enthusiasts, that there is something valuable and differentiated about, operating in that space.
Right.
In any case, like, why do you put an editor's letter on cover 2? Because you don't give a shit, because you're enthusiastic, and because that's where you feel like it ought to go. And it's
that's where you want to put it.
Great. So that's, I love the decision because it was enthusiasm that drove it.
I think it's interesting because eventually, I'm assuming that next issue, if there is an advertiser, will go inside that cover. Listen, the beauty
maybe, but I think that, and this is part of the general reassessment around the use of all of these things, right? If it is effectively a collector's item, right, which is kind of what it is, why do you put the editor's letter on cover 2? Well, maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe that's a signature thing. The New Yorker, for instance, you might have one ad before you get to the TOC, right? The table of contents, for those who are not print people. And that's a signature of the New Yorker, right? You don't have 40 pages of ads in front of it, even though you could probably sell 40 pages of ads in the New Yorker if you mess with the price point. So is the cover 2 editor's letter going to be a byline signature thing? If so, great. Let's make it a signature thing and let's get famous for that. And if it's not, then yeah, maybe that is the most valuable place for the ad. But we start to have the conversation, I think, is going to be the thing that defines what they do next. And
right. Listen, I'm all about the zine mentality. And if you open, if you open any zine, doesn't matter if it was a sci-fi zine in the 60s or punk zine in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, whatever, there were ads, right? Like Maximum Rock and Roll was full of ads. But not the type of ads that would take a front cover for the most part. With that said, almost every fanzine I have, every zine I have, the front page is for the letter. Excuse me, the inner front page is some sort of
the cover 2 is an editor's letter or some kind of introduction. Yeah, no, look, it's intriguing. One of the people that came to Breakfast Club this morning was Foster Kamer, who is the editor at Futurism and helps out behind the scenes with a couple of other things. And we were talking about this theory that I'm trying to operate with at the moment, which is around creating a consortium of newsletter writers and representing them for advertising purposes. So
that's cool, Ben. That's super cool.
Not dissimilar to what Talkhouse does in the podcast space, for instance. But it just feels like there are all of these people who are writing I want to downplay the word writing. They are creating really interesting content. Some of it is written, some of it is aggregation, some of it is video, some of it is whatever. But they are doing so through this newsletter delivery system.
Right.
And the powers that be in an advertising media model say, oh, that is like digital content. That is like the BuzzFeed.com of the world. And so we're going to value it as such. And my thought is, it's actually not. It's actually much, much more valuable because it has a one-to-one relationship with the audience that's parasocial in the way that like podcasting is, and that educating the people doing this stuff on the actual value that they're creating and pricing it properly is a big opportunity. So thinking about how to put that together. If anybody listening wants to help, give me a shout, please. Open for collaboration and suggestions.
I love it, man. Let's pick that up next week. I want to talk more about the opportunity of that consolidation or sort of a federated way of being able to sell ads. I think is super cool. Which, by the way, has been done.
Well,
comes from the blog world back in the day.
Of course.
Ask you, where are these bubbles coming up from?
So, for those who aren't watching this, the software is doing that annoying thing where it puts emoji bubbles into the video feed when I gesture. So I was just like touching my collar with my thumb sort of pointed in an upward direction, and the software figures that out. And
are you serious?
Look, yeah, see? So
look at that.
Yeah, but see, that's the whole thing. It's never predictable. It's really annoying.
Whoa, I just did balloons.
You did balloons, right? So this is the problem. This feature has been. Well, no, that's the thing. The feature has been incorporated into every video chat software with no explanation whatsoever. And so, typically speaking, oh god, all right. So those not watching, Jeff is now making a heart with his hands, right, trying to get.
That's not punk rock.
Never mind if it's punk rock or not. It's just my point more so is it's annoying that there's no rhyme or reason to it, and none of the video chat software seem to have figured out rhyme or reason.
Listen, Ben, before you run, what are you listening to today?
Listening to, from a music standpoint, I am listening to the collected compilation series Disco Pogo for Punks and Pumps.
Oh, I'm into that right now.
Which is the, I don't know if you remember, it was the cover mount CD series on Jockey Slut, the English, the UK dance music magazine of the late 90s and early aughts. And they did this amazing cover mount compilation series called Disco Pogo for Punks and Pumps that somebody, and this is called, I think it's called Cover Mount CDs on YouTube, but basically it's an entire YouTube channel devoted to recordings of these compilation CDs that were mounted on the covers of largely UK music mags in the early aughts. And Disco Pogo for Punks and Pumps was an outstanding series, and I used to use it a lot when I DJ'd at that time. So I'm going back and listening to a bunch of those old records.
Super, Ben. By the way, give me some rips or point me where I can get them.
Okay. Cool. Well, like I said, I think it's cover CDs or cover mount CDs on YouTube is the channel, and then I'm going to put something in the newsletter, the Sick newsletter this week on Thursday, so you'll be able to see that too.
So listen, we're running late, but like so much to be said about what CDs and you know, Mookies. I think it's called Mookies in Japan, if I'm not mistaken. It's when a magazine comes with something. I believe it's called a Mookie, but
a Mook. Yeah. So it's right. So this is the portmanteau of magazine and book. Also, bookazine is the opposite of that, or not the opposite, but the counter to that. The Mook, right? So this is the classic Japanese magazine as product catalog, and so you treat it as an item to hold on to and as a document.
Those books right there.
Yeah.
All right, Ben. We've run through another half hour. Awesome conversation today. I love how today went.
Same.
A lot to be said. Let us know what you think of the show. Find us in DMs on Instagram, of course. You know where to find us. Or leave us a show note. Send us an email, cultureclub.show. Follow, like us on your favorite podcasting app under Culture Club Show. Ben.
All right.
Enjoy your week, bud.
Thanks, Jeff. Likewise. Talk to you soon.
See you.